Hey there. My name is Bernice Joel Montgomery Rusk, but I go by Joel Rusk. I'm here to share with you about my experiences as the other. To give you some background, I want to share a little bit of my lineage. Through my biological father, I come from the Blackfoot Nation in Alberta, which is a First Nations Indian band. I say Indian with a heavy heart because we are not Indians. We are Indigenous to Canada, but legally through the Canadian system, the Canadian government system, we're known as Indians. Through my biological mother, I come from the Dene Nation, which is from Fort Nelson First Nation, northern BC. This has been my greatest experience as being the other. Being Indigenous in Canada is a minority, and we have been discriminated against in many different layers. I'd like to share a little bit about how that has impacted me. I've experienced my share of macro and microaggressions. A macroaggression is something that's a little bit more overt, a little bit more in your face in terms of racist behavior, which is downright people saying derogatory terms to me and saying names like, chug and all these things that can be quite offensive and have negative meaning behind them, and they're saying it to hurt me. Microaggressions is something that's a little bit more covert. It's a little bit more kind of like hidden, and it's something that's like if someone might come up and say, "Oh, you work, you work, you making, you work for a living, and you do this job, or you have education," and this is kind of implying that Indigenous people don't go to school or don't finish school or and have work and don't just live off of social assistance, which is an extremely racist thing to say. And so I've experienced this in my share, and I feel that because of this, I've really developed something, and this could be genetic, and this is just my own assumption, but I do feel that living through this life and living through these experiences is caused me a bit of social anxiety, because a lot of that social anxiety is that feeling that people are going to judge me or say things or assume that I'm going to steal something, or and I'm treated that way, and I have a lot of experiences that can show that. I've had my experience of systemic and institutionalized racism as well. I've been treated negatively by police, especially. Growing up, I've had times where I've been assaulted by police officers when I was doing nothing but walking through a park, pushing a stroller with a kid, like a little baby, in the middle of a summer day, doing absolutely nothing wrong, and I've had police assault me to a point where they've had their hand on their gun, and it's quite intimidating and it's quite concerning, and it's something that a lot of people do not experience and will possibly never have to experience. And that's just one example. I've experienced it several times. This has impacted my record, because every time things like this happen and they take your name, then you get put down to the system as being investigated. And so, what people don't realize when they respond to people speaking out about this kind of racism is that every single time that you do that, and people I see a lot of times say, just give them your name, give them your ID, just show them, just obey, just do it. And you become investigated, and they look into you, and your name goes into a file, and a file is open, regardless of whether you're doing something wrong. And as it becomes a bigger and bigger and bigger, and and don't get me wrong, it was a wild child. I've definitely did things wrong, but I've never done anything horrible. Like I don't have charges or anything like that. I don't have a criminal record, but I definitely got caught doing this. I mean, having some this at the fair, and little things like that, right? Like I'm not innocent by any means, but a lot of times that I got pulled over, a lot of things on my file was nothing wrong. I was doing nothing aside from being Indigenous, and that's really speaks to being the other, a minority, being the colored other. Um, this created an issue when I tried to go to college and take secondary education. I had to do a huge process. I almost didn't get to go, so this almost stopped me from becoming educated, which is a huge impact on my life. Growing up, I moved around a lot, and this gave me a little bit of a different sense of feeling of the other, as always being that new kid, never really having friends, never really having that support group growing up, which made it exceptionally different. But this really makes me want to speak to something else, because something I've experienced in these towns that I've lived was not only was I treated differently by typically Caucasian people, people that were non-colored, but also I was in towns where there was significant polarization of the indigenous population and non. And the indigenous population would call me names, in particular a name that basically means red apple or red skin, white inside. And I was treated as the other by both sides. And this caused a lot of indifference for me in how I see people and treated people and behaved with society. And it was the saddest to me, because the most saddest thing that can really happen to a society or people, in this case indigenous people, is being treated so much as the other that you see yourself as the other and you identify as the other. So when some of your group starts to behave differently or act differently, in this case, in my opinion, move forward and heal, then you get treated differently and you get treated like you're not part of that group. It's sad because they've taken on and basically conformed to this concept, to these discrimination values of the other. And this is something that I really hope that we can move forward from and overcome, and realize that there is no such thing as the other, that we're all in this together. In this case, we're all Canadians, and we need to just find a way to move forward. We need to find a way to stop treating each other as different, that acknowledge that we all experience this feeling to some degree, that we all are the other in some way or form. And so, in that regards, we're all together. We're not the other, we're together. And I just hope that we can move forward. Thank you for your time.